Hey everybody, today, take three. Do I have boogers in my nose? I swear to God. That's why I didn't keep my last recording, because it was just like, and I already have like the biggest fucking nostrils in the world. So, anyway, take three. I'm going to talk about Gemini, the third house, and Mercury. Gemini, typical traits when people talk about Gemini is that they're two-faced, they're evil, they're mischievous, but they're also funny and youthful and lively and blah, So I'm here not only to dispel some of those rumors, but also confirm them. So let's start. Oh, also, if you don't know where Gemini is in your chart, it could be your sun, but it might be your moon, or it might be your rising, or something like that. Or you might have a lot of planets in Gemini. I'll leave links down below. And you have to know what time you were born and where you were born. So when we're talking about Gemini, the energy. The main focus of the energy is that it being one of the first six houses is sort of a more personal sort of energy. It's more about how we think, how we think about things, how we take information in, and how we share that information. It's a very multi-dimensional sort of thing, because when we're thinking, our thought patterns, they're not just they could be just straightforward, but often thought in itself is abstract. At least to me, it is. So Gemini then just represents communication. It represents and sharing that knowledge with typically like our group of friends. But it could also be bigger things than that. I just think of it as like communication in general, big and small scale. So yeah, let's say, so that's also what your third house represents. It's how you take in communication, and it's how you give it. And it's the process through which you learned in your childhood and continuing to learn through your life how to take that information in. So let's say, for instance, you have like Virgo in your third house. You might have had like a very practical sort of way of like, not only like how you took in information, because the third house is also like elementary school. So you probably knew that the only way to excel in school or whatever was to be like very practical in your work, but also being very adaptable, like a Virgo is, like very adaptable to how you do things. So a Mercury also rules Virgo, but it's like a sort of a different sort of energy in Virgo. So yeah, the biggest lesson for Gemini to learn then, regardless of where Gemini is in your chart, is to just focus. Because Mercury, the planet of communication, it can get scattered pretty easily, especially if you have Mercury in Gemini, which is its ruling planet. And Mercury works well here, but it's just the Gemini energy itself is pretty scattered. But scattered in the way that thought is scattered. It's very abstract. It's a very abstract energy. Gemini, they can take a lot of different sort of information, a lot of different pieces of information from certain things, see it from as many sides as they possibly can, and learn to incorporate it into something. Like, a Gemini would be like a very good marketer, or like a good salesperson, because they'll know how to talk to many different sorts of people. Because I see Gemini as like sort of like the everyman when it comes to the signs, at least when it comes to the air signs, because I feel like Libra, they really get hung up on making personal attachments, to where it feels like, especially if you're not used to the energy like me, you sort of lose yourself in that person, or they might lose themselves in somebody or whatever. It's like very confusing. Or like Aquarius, which is very like standoffish, like sort of looking at somebody objectively. Aquarius is very good at that. But Gemini, they're very personable. They know how to talk to not only people like them, but other people too, like to make messages and to make meanings and to make symbols be universal. So that's a very good trait with Gemini. So Mercury, again, back to Mercury, it represents our abstract thought. It represents how we think. So Mercury is never that far away from your sun sign. Because, how we think is very tied to our soul, which is what the sun represents, our soul desire. And it's the very process through which we think is very important. So let's say, you might be a Leo, but your Mercury is in Virgo. So you might be very loving and warm and just have this sort of personality that sort of like draws people to you. But you might implement certain things in a very practical, sort of regimented way like a Virgo would. So yeah, sorry. I'm trying to think about what I said in the last video because I feel like I said something that was really cool when talking about Mercury. But whatever, I forgot it. That's what I get for having boogers in my nose. So yeah, our thought, how we think is very attached to our soul's desire. So that's why Mercury, that's why it's a very important planet. It's just how we think. And it's easy as a Gemini or with somebody with a lot of Gemini energy to get very scattered and to not have a very regimented way of doing things. Like me, for instance, I have my rising, I have Mars in Gemini, and my Mercury makes like aspects to most of the planets in my chart. So I relate to the Gemini energy incredibly well. I'm actually probably more Gemini than I am Pisces. And I have a Pisces sun and moon. But the biggest lesson I feel like for Gemini is to focus. Focus. Because Gemini being an air sign, mutable air, being an air sign, it's naturally assertive. So it's going to be assertive in thought. It's going to be assertive in communication. But being a mutable sign, it could vary. It's easy for a Gemini to sort of like become too adaptable or to like just sort of get lost too much in either communications, whether that be gossip or just randomly texting people or just being like, just hanging around people just to hang around people. But also in how we do things and our patterns. So, a Gemini might start one thing and then just sort of forget about it, move on to the next thing, do it, and then just get bored and go to the next thing. So it's very important for a Gemini to just to find their passion, because I feel like out of all the air signs, Gemini is probably rules with their mind the most because they overthink and their brains never stop moving. It's just constant. They're always thinking, to the point of overthinking, to the point of not doing anything. And because a Gemini might be too hung up on making decisions about making a decision instead of making a decision. So they need to incorporate more of their opposite sign, like every sign does, which is Sagittarius. Sagittarians, you could read like the sorry, I'm trying not to swear that much. You could like read like, okay, let's say a Sagittarius has their own point of view about why something, should be illegal. And you could read to them a law book or whatever, explaining to them why X or whatever should stay legal or whatever. But a Sagittarius is just ruled by their heart. They're not going to be persuaded by anything because they believe in what they believe. They stand in what they believe. To a fault sometimes, but that's with every sign. They do their own things to a fault. Excuse me. But a Gemini needs to learn how to incorporate some of that, learning how to stand up for what they believe in, and also to make decisions. Because a Gemini, again, they can see something from like a million different perspectives because that's how their mind works. It might be hard for them to like just stand up and make a decision about something. Gemini is probably the hardest sign to pin down, along with like Sagittarius and Pisces, because a Gemini knows what you're thinking. A Gemini knows thought patterns, how people think more than any other sign. So when a Gemini feels like you're trying to like pull an over on them or switch it up on them, they're going to switch it up on you just as fast, if not faster, because they're masculine air. They're assertive air sign. That's how they do their shit. They're going to do it faster and quicker than anybody else, except, well, and Aries is different. But a Gemini, at least when it comes to mental thought, they're going to do it faster than anybody else because that's all they know. That's their biggest skill, is knowing how people think, knowing how people expect them to think, seeing the patterns in things and knowing when to deviate from them in very little minute ways. Like, I guess you could compare them to Aquarius, but Aquarius, they know how to switch it up in big picture sort of ways, in ways that you might not even really get or understand. But a Gemini with like day-to-day communication, which is what Gemini rules, day-to-day communication, the third house, how we talk to other people, how they talk to us, how we gather that information, you know, it's our best friends, it's our neighbors, it's our brothers and sisters. They rule that, so they know how to fuck it up for other people in that, you know, because they just know it. And I feel like that's why Geminis get the bad reputation that they do, that they're two-faced, or that they're, you know, evil or whatever. But, you know, a Gemini, they spend most of their day gathering knowledge, gathering it through communication, gathering it through observation, gathering it through just like, oh, look at, well, that's doing that and this is doing that and this, you know, that when they fall back and when they become their other twin, which is more receptive, which is more passive. Well, it's not really passive, but it's just that they're trying to store and analyze the information or whatever. That's usually when they make the decision of, well, I'm going to act this way now because I've done this, and this person might expect me to do that, but I'm going ahead and do this. And that can work in good ways, but it can also work in shitty ways because, you know, a Gemini might turn some people off or ruin communications or whatever just by doing that, just by using that power that they have, their power of thought, and just using that to their ultimate advantage in a way that's just petty. Let's just face it, it's petty. And I've been there. I've done that a million times. But, you know, and it's hard to sort of like think about it and just be like, why am I doing this? It's just that, you know, sometimes you're just doing it just to do it, which is, I feel like a Gemini can sort of fall into that pattern. So if a Gemini can actually own up to their actions and to what they say and to how they do things, and not sort of be the mutable air sign that they are and just sort of blend in with the crowd and sort of, you know, I don't want to say pass blame, but be like, oh, what, me? Did I do what? What do you mean? Which is, again, very Gemini. So they need to stand up for what they believe in. Stand up for what you do. Be more like a Sagittarius in that regard. You know, just be like, yeah, I said that, or yeah, I did that. So what? What are you going to do about it? Because the Sagittarius could give a fuck. Gemini, you should learn how to give less of a fuck. But not only that, focus. A Gemini, they like spreading their interests out, but sometimes they spread themselves too thin. So, the biggest, I feel like even bigger than that last lesson, the biggest lesson for Gemini is to just learn how to master 2 or 3 things. 2 at minimum, because Gemini is a dual sign. They have to do 2 things. Always. I've found this constant within Geminis. They even might be sort of like ambidextrous. So find 2 things that you can balance and do them well. Do them in a way that is going to make you stand out. Because a Gemini, again, they're afraid to just step out and be themselves because they don't want to be judged. They're already over analytical. They're already always in their own head, and they're always like, the biggest critic of a Gemini is a Gemini. Their brain, because they just overthink and they see the wrongs in things before they see the rights. They come to a conclusion about something as being bad or being a failure before they even have a chance to fail. So a Gemini, I feel like more than the other air signs, they have to learn not to let fear rule them, not to let fear get the better of them, not to let their own insecurities and their own self doubts stop them from shining. Because I feel like that's like the biggest curse of a Gemini. Like, I feel like Geminis have so much promise and they have so much to give. Every Gemini I've ever met, like they've left an impression on me. But it's like they're so ephemeral in the way in a sense that they're sort of happy and just sort of blending in. When I feel like I feel like they have a lot to offer. Every sign does really, but especially a Gemini because they are meant to shine. They're meant to stand out from the crowd. But, sometimes they just like to just take it easy and just play it safe in the background, which fine. But as a Gemini, if you're a Gemini, find something that you're really good at. Find two things that you're really good at. And just excel and do your best. Don't let your thoughts or don't let other people or your own insecurities or whatever get the better of you because you're better than that. Long day. Very, very long day. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Gemini. I hope I don't have to record this again. So if you like this, just like it, I guess. Comment, leave feedback or whatever. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye.